many people come to me to get ready to sell.
Mhm.
Some don't, right? Some come to me with a special project. Some folks want to pass their business down to their child. My obligation is to my client in that way. Similarly, when folks will come to the banking side, which is led by Ted and of course Ben, sometimes the team will look at their books and say, you're actually leaving a little bit of money on the table. If you tweaked
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z, you'd have a much better outcome. And so in those cases, they might encourage that person or that client to talk to my team to see if there's something that we could support. And then,
Gotcha.
get them really ready for a sell that would be then much more lucrative, for them in that long
For
term.
sure. Welcome to the American Med Spa Association podcast, Medical Spa Insider. This week, AmSpa founder Alex Thiersch is speaking with Annie Hockey, president and head of consulting for the Skytale Group. All right, everybody, welcome. Alex Thiersch coming to you live from the AmSpa Clubhouse, which is also known as my living room. And we are very, very grateful to have the president and head of consulting for Skytale, Annie Robertson Hockey, who has a lot of experience doing management consulting and helping businesses grow. And for many of you who recognize Skytale Group is a company that we've had Ben Hernandez on, I think, a number of times on this podcast. They've been huge supporters of ours. They're at a lot of our events. They are known for and tend to be known for doing, M&A advising. So they advise you on buying and selling, investment banking. So if you want to sell your med spa, they can help you out with that. They have since expanded. They are now growing very, very quickly. It's been really, really cool to watch and to see it go from kind of Ben and James at first to now. I don't even know. I haven't even met half the people that are at your firm. But it's been really, really exciting. And Annie, you've come on in the consulting world. First of all, welcome to the program. Welcome to Skytale. Welcome to the industry.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I'll take all three welcomes.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, and I say welcome to the industry. That's not exactly fair. You have been since September. You started with Skytale, and before then, I was looking a little bit at your resume. Obviously you've got a business background. You were consulted at was it Bain and Company, and then some other things. I'm curious. Just first of all, give us a little quick thumbnail sketch of who you are, your background, and what it is that you do for Skytale, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that introduction. And as you said, I think Skytale Group is really known for representing sellers in the industry and being an investment bank. And candidly, when I first came across Skytale, I didn't know that they had a management consulting arm. And so we do, and it's one of the things that it's sort of my job to help ensure that folks know about us, so that if they could use our support there, they have access to that. But I came in the capacity of head of consulting at Skytale. Although technically as president, I'm not allowed to have a favorite child, so I love both banking and consulting. But my background really is kind of hybrid operational and consulting or advising, and I say that because I think having operated, it makes me a lot better of an advisor. And I also think being an advisor and having to think really strategically makes me a better operator.
For
And
sure.
so, I'm sitting in San Francisco. I kind of grew up, I started my career in Silicon Valley, kind of early stage startups, and really found a niche for myself working with a visionary founder who maybe had found product market fit, but didn't necessarily have the sort of operational proclivity. And so being their
Mhm.
right hand woman to put together the processes and procedures and hire the right people to scale that organization. I ended up going back to Stanford to get my MBA and decided I do part one business school in the classroom and then maybe part two outside. And so I joined a global management consulting firm called Bain,
Mhm.
where I worked at the intersection of their private equity and retail consumer practices. So
Mhm.
diligencing companies on behalf of private equity and then doing, things post-purchase. And I say that because there I really kind of learned how private equity looks at the world and how they look
Mhm.
at companies. And again, that is something I really try to take with me
Yeah,
to our clients at Skytale.
for sure.
I left Bain to start a company of my own. So, really relate to the blood, sweat, and tears that can go into starting a company. That
So you're
company,
not, you're an entrepreneur also.
I'm an entrepreneur. Yeah, I'm an
Okay,
entrepreneur
that's
also.
awesome.
Exactly. I'm now a happy board member, but the company is profitable. It's in San Francisco. It's over 100 employees. And I
That's
was
awesome.
fortunate enough to have a team that was, you know, doing incredibly. And so I was able to really fire myself from that position. And that's something I help
Yeah.
some of our clients do all the time. But after that, it left me sort of the ability to join Skytail, where I really try to bring, that ability to scale organizations and
Sure.
strategize and relate to our clients and our client work.
So I'm curious, the kind of consulting arm of Skytail, like, because I know Skytail pretty well. Um, how does that fit? Because if they are, they're helping with selling, usually is kind of what they're known for, as you said. How does the consulting fit into that? Because and you mentioned, that you want to make sure people know that you have this and that you do it. How does that fit into the whole selling? Like if someone's going to sell and they want to try to sell their med spa and they go to Skytale, how do you come in and fit in the whole process?
Yeah, it's a great question. So technically speaking, we are complementary organizations, but we're separate organizations. So many people come to me to get ready to sell.
Mhm.
Some don't, right? Some come to me with a special project. Some folks want to pass their business down to their child. My obligation is to my client in that way. Similarly, when folks will come to the banking side, which is led by Ted and of course Ben, sometimes the team will look at their books and say, you're actually leaving a little bit of money on the table. If you tweaked
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z, you'd have a much better outcome. And so in those cases, they might encourage that person or that client to talk to my team to see if there's something that we could support. And then,
Gotcha.
get them really ready for a sell that would be then much more lucrative, for them in that long
For
term.
sure. Well, and I mean, that actually leads to kind of my next point, my next question, because that's a huge thing when people think about buying and selling or selling their med spas. And we have seen obviously an uptick of that in the last couple of years, which has been exciting. Um, but when you think about selling your med spa, there's so much that goes into running a business and preparing it so that it's ready to be sold. And I don't think I realized that at the beginning when I first kind of started learning about M&A, that um, the amount of work that goes into building up the med spa so that it can be sold is incredible. And talk about that process and how that all works.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's a preparing to sell, and then actually the selling process itself, it's a lot of work. It's also
Mhm.
emotionally really difficult. And so, I think one of the things, if you prepare early, one of the things that really helps you with is the sort of like manual work related piece of the sell is a little bit more stable, and you can sort of focus on, picking the right partner. It's a really
Mhm.
big deal. Meeting folks, thinking about how you feel, just so that it's a really positive experience. But, I think like I would say there's a few things that private equity looks at, and people ask me all the time, sort of when do I start preparing to when should I start to prepare for sell? Maybe I want to sell in
Mhm.
10 years, 15 years, 3 years. I'm not really sure. And candidly, the answer is now. And I say that for two reasons. One is everything that you will do to prepare to sell will actually make your business better. And so
Mhm.
why not do it now? And then two, it is so much easier to slow down a process and put pause on a process than to accelerate, right? And sort of start
Mhm.
and end up working longer than you want to. So, there's sort of three things I would focus on if I were an owner or entrepreneur, in order to start getting ready. I think one is kind of getting your books in order. I think
Mhm.
it's kind of like organizing your house before an open house or
Mhm.
before if someone comes in to tell you what you should sell your house for, just packaging things, making sure your
Mhm.
reports are in the right place, etc. Um, and then the two sort of other things that I think private equity is really looking for is can your business run and produce without you being a core or really
Mhm.
high producer? And
Mhm.
so, that concern is single provider risk. And so focusing on how can I make sure I have a large team of producers, and the more equally all of them are producing, the better, because there's less risk with one person. And
Mhm.
candidly, that will, as I said before, all of these things will also just help you as a business owner. Taking the focus off of you as a sole producer or a primary producer also is a really important step as a leader in that
Well, and
leadership.
that's not easy for a lot of people. Like I remember that even when I was with my business with AmSpa, like the one of the hardest things I've found, and I would love your thoughts on this in the folks that you're helping in this industry, is being able to let go of some of the actual kind of doing and producing and going more to leading, directing, allowing others to be those producers. It's really, it sounds like you can do it. It's easy, but it's really, really not, because you have to let go of a lot of the control and the things that you're doing, and so you have to let somebody else do it, and they might not do it exactly the same as you're doing it. How difficult is that? From what you've seen from some of the providers in our business.
I agree. I think it's incredibly hard. And it's something I did at my last company, right? Like I hired someone to take over. I hired a head of people, then I hired a general counsel, and I had hired a head of regulatory affairs, and you're sort of letting go over
Mhm.
time. And I think, something I like to always keep in mind when I'm having this conversation with folks is our clients are successful because they are incredible producers, and they probably enjoy it, right? They
Mhm.
like they like that
Yeah, for
experience.
sure.
And secondly, it's so hard when you're in client services to say no to a client, to a customer, right?
Mhm.
Especially ones who have been loyal from the beginning, because they're going to want to keep seeing you. Um, and I say this because I do think the biggest barrier in many ways is emotional and like internal to sort of
Mhm.
letting go. But, you know, I tend to kind of use a framework of there's really four things to keep in mind to do. One is hiring good people. I think
Mhm.
as a leader, hiring good people is the most important thing that you can do for an organization. Invest in them, train them up, make sure you are completely comfortable with them so that you can confidently say to your clients and our patients, you are in good hands. They are as good, if not better than me. Um,
Mhm.
and then delegate and empower and trust. And this is the hardest step. And
That's
that's
the
why
hard part. Yeah.
that's why my fourth is stop yourself, right?
Probably the most important.
It's the most important because, you look, and this happens to me as a leader, right? Someone might do an Excel analysis differently than me, or put together a slide differently than me. But at the end of the day, if the analysis is right and or the slide presents the takeaway message, that's okay. And so,
Mhm.
I think a forcing function can be, how does this scale? And so, like, one thing to think about when you're trying to stop yourself from telling someone how to do something is, how would this work if I had 5 locations? How would this work
Mhm.
if I had 10 locations? And if you can't take yourself out of one, there's no
Right.
way to be successfully able to scale till 10. And so I think
Yeah.
that really, at least for me, that can be a forcing function to, like, put the pencil down, maybe the needle down, what
Well,
have you.
and put the needle down, right? So in in our kind of world of aesthetics, and where it's very personal, right? You've got, it's kind of an intimate, personal, trusting relationship that you have with your injector, if that's what you're going for. It is, and oftentimes people will start with kind of the founding injector, and they'll be with most of the clients at the beginning. Like there's a certain art, there's science, there's anatomy, there's all that goes into it. There's pharmacology and rheology, everything that we're talking about. How, like, it's easy to say, will this scale, like when you're thinking about it from a product standpoint, but when the product is kind of your hand and your talent, right? And scaling means trying to figure out how to duplicate yourself, or have somebody else who's maybe not duplicating yourself but can do the same sort of things. That to me, just seems, inevitably harder and more difficult. And I'm wondering if you have the same feeling.
Yeah, it's something I think about all the time. And I have a few thoughts to share. And I think the first thing I'll share is I'm not a medical provider. And so, you know, it's incredibly complex. And I will never sit here and tell you that I would know just how easy it is to inject and or transition injection. But sort of a few things that I like to encourage our clients. Um, one thing that you can do is sort of make your firm in a way like a Blue Man Group, where instead of it, I'll just use, let's use me. I'm Nurse Annie. Instead of saying it's, Annie's hands, it's the Annie method, right? So maybe
Mhm,
every single person on your team is trained in the Annie method, right? Even if I
mhm,
take my name out of it, maybe my location is called, Lux, Inspire Beauty.
mhm,
It's the Inspire method, right? And so
mhm,
everyone there is trained in that same method. And then I
mhm,
would say, second thing, just a gentle handoff, I think is so important, making sure your clients know ahead of time. Maybe there's one appointment where you're with them and the new provider. I think just bringing your customers along for the journey so there's not a drop dead date. I think just makes it more graceful.
mhm. I like that using the Annie method. I think that's a good way to kind of conceptualize it where you're not seeing me, you're seeing you're getting my technique and I'm training people on my technique and then they can do it for you and oftentimes probably be more affordable. I'm one thing I'm curious, you've got a Silicon Valley background, MBA, you've worked at Bain and company, you've got you now you are you're a startup founder. When you came into this, when you started and really got exposed to medical spas and specifically, was there anything that surprised you, or what were your thoughts when you first came in and you thought, wow, like is it, because I love asking this question to people because it's such a unique, different, explosive industry, but it's also, really got its challenges and it's got its, the founders have their challenges. There's not a lot of MBAs who are running the businesses, right? So I'm curious just what your thoughts were. You're like, holy crap, what did I get myself into? Or was it a little more exciting?
That's such a funny question. I will tell you this. My first conference that I went to, it's like it could not be more different than financial technology conferences, which are and I did not bring the right wardrobe. I was like noted. I have to have a daytime outfit and a nighttime outfit, right?
Yep.
That is not what it was in the industry I came from. But I think candidly, it's a really fun industry.
Mhm,
And I think there is just a buzz and an excitement because we are moving at incredibly fast pace. There's a ton of innovation happening, both in terms of pharmacological resources, devices, techniques, right? There's a growing TAM or total addressable market. So more and more people are using these services. And then third, there's all this money that's flowing in from private equity. And so it kind of feels like everyone in the industry is like, ooh, we're really onto something. Right. And I think they are. It's a really fun place to be. And the other thing I'll say, and this actually does parallel the industry that I came from. So I came from financial technology and, you know, I'll make sure the parallel is apparent, but in that industry and sort of, I didn't do crypto, but certainly crypto, the industry was moving faster than regulation. And so regulation was
mhm,
sort of trying to keep up with the pace of innovation. And I think
mhm,
we're in a very similar moment here where states are sort of all trying to do something. They're not doing things similarly. Maybe something national could happen, maybe not. And I think it really allows for, while there's risk, hopefully there will be a dialogue between
mhm.
the industry and the providers and regulators so that we can all come up with ways to make this industry safe, like, and maintain that balance, right, between regulation and innovation, because you need both
Yeah,
ultimately.
for sure. No, I think I mean, you hit it right on the head, and that's kind of why we exist as AmSpa is to help with that. And it's interesting because you know you it- like the financial technology space is heavily regulated on a kind of a federal level. From what I remember, our industry is not as regulated federally, but which in some ways makes it more complex, and less, because you don't have the 500-page federal regulations to search through. But it's also been, it's also, like, with our industry, there's just not a lot of clarity, and I think that's the thing that we need more even than anything is clarity. And I'm curious, like, when you talk to your other, your private equity friends, or your other investment banker types, or your consultant friends, like, how do they feel about this industry? Are they excited to get? Do they want to get into it? Is there a lot of interest to get into it, or are people feeling a little nervous about it? I'm curious what the overall feeling is.
Yeah. It really depends on the firm. And I think it depends on the firm's sort of risk profile and
Mm,
appetite. Let me tell you, we have the investment banking side has a list of hundreds of private equity firms who are looking to get into this space. On the other hand, there are certain firms where, they still think med spa is a niche industry that won't
mhm.
catch on, right? There's a lot of older men who sit on the investment committees of some of these, and so they might not understand sort of the size of the opportunity. And, you know, I think everyone, regardless of whether you're a firm that's excited about it or a firm that's going to wait and see and then maybe get into this space, I think there is concern about regulation and safety, because one bad case is really, really dangerous for that person and that family, and that's tragic, but also kind of your reputation in the industry as a whole. And so essentially what we see is institutional capital will just sort of take the highest common denominator of, safety, right? And safety,
Mhm.
I guess, compliance. And so, maybe one state is kind of the Wild West, and then maybe, you have California, you have these other states that maybe have higher standard. They might deploy that higher standard regardless of where the state, their locations are. And candidly, that
Mhm.
makes it easier from an oversight perspective too, if everyone's sort of marching to the same beat.
For sure. No, I mean, that's what I tell people too. It's if you can make it work in California, you can make it work anywhere.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's definitely the case.
Yeah.
Um, what when you I've asked a lot of folks this question as well, when they, either when they're coming in from new industries, or they're business owners, or they have experience with that. Is there one or two things that you notice business owners in this industry that they seem to do, or they seem to not do very well? And I don't mean not well, but they just maybe they're not quite as adept at it, or as educated, or on a particular facet of the business. And then is there another part where where it seems like people really know how to do something else like this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the what they know how to do. Um, I think that, providers, and it's tricky because our client, med spas could be owned by a business person, run by a business person, or they can be run by a provider who's also become a business person. The latter is
Hmm.
more common,
Yep.
candidly.
Hmm.
Um, I think that this industry has an incredible pulse on who their customer is and what they need. And,
Hmm.
that might be because they're talking in the treatment room, because it's a really intimate thing to have
Hmm.
someone, changing your appearance, or, preserving your appearance, or what have you. But I think there are so many businesses and so many industries where the person developing the solution is not acutely tuned into the customer or the patient need. And I think that this is a beautiful
That's
industry where
interesting.
that feedback loop is so small. And I think that's why the industry can keep up with what is it that people want, right? A few years ago it was this, maybe now it's this. But I think it's a really beautiful thing, and something a lot of other industries could actually um, learn from
Yeah,
the space.
it's good to hear.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of the things that can be improved, one of the things I've really noticed is these are economically pretty incredible businesses. And
Mhm.
so oftentimes I think there can be a little bit less diligence on every single penny because they're profitable anyways, right?
Mhm.
But just remember that, every vendor contract you can negotiate, right? Looking at your books so you can understand, provider A is actually producing a lot more than provider B, but provider B maybe is getting paid more. Those little things, just because your bank account is going up doesn't mean that it still will really serve you. To just get a sense of what's under the hood and also make sure that your people and your vendors are working for you, right? Because, that's what they're there for.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. That you said, folks don't diligence every penny in. Do you mean like from the med spa side when they're looking at vendors, or are you talking about from like the private equity side when they're looking at med spas, or both?
Oh, private equity firms are looking at
Okay.
everything. I was
So
talking about the former.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So that's what I figured that because I they tend to look at every penny.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So it's almost like because you're on this rocket ship and it's going, you're not necessarily being super careful checking every single last gauge all the time because you're just going like crazy and that's the most important thing. But is the lesson then if you do slow down and look at some of the gauges, there are ways to always improve and to fix things and to because that's the one thing that I'm seeing right now as I've been taking kind of a step back and looking at our business is um one of the things that we struggle with, that I struggle with personally, is chasing, opportunities and bright shiny objects because we have so many opportunities. But every now and then I'll take a step back and look and say, look, wow, we've got so much like right in front of us that we're doing, but we're not doing well enough to really capture all of the revenue for it. Is that something you see a lot of as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time with is looking at all of the potential opportunities in front of someone and focusing, like where do we prioritize and why? And that's,
Mhm.
based on criteria that are different for every single customer, right? Um, I think that the one of the main things that I see, and maybe this is something that I should have said in terms of areas for improvement, is a focus on customer acquisition versus customer retention.
Mhm.
Everyone is sitting on a pot of gold. They put so much work into acquiring a loyal customer base who, maybe comes back at least twice a year for a treatment.
Mhm.
That is actually it can be a much more lucrative area to focus on than kind of throwing dollars at additional, digital marketing avenues that maybe haven't been proven out. Digital marketing is an amazing tool, by the way, but I think it can be used well and it can be used not well. Whereas you look at if you increase customer retention by 5%, or if you increase average spend of your customers by even 10%,
Mhm.
compounded, that can make like a huge difference on your top line.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's something we talk about all the time, and I think it's easy to forget because the marketing, the getting of new patients, the getting your brand out there, growing it on Instagram and TikTok and all that. That's kind of the fun part, right? I mean, because your name is growing, your brand is growing, everything. There's more people looking at you, but it's not as important as the folks that you already have. And the retention rate for patients in our business overall is not great. Like it's getting better, I think, from what we've seen, but it's not great. There's still a lot of turnover. There's a lot of patients who come in for one Botox treatment, they never come back, or they're not even like reached. They're not even followed up with. So, it's interesting that is that common in other industries, or is that kind of just unique to ours? Do you think?
It's a good question. I mean, I think generally speaking, recurring revenue is always the sort
Hmm.
of gold mecca, especially of financial backers. So in software, for example, SaaS, software as a service, their focus certainly would be on, obviously you need to acquire the customers in the first place, but I do think proving out that recurring revenue, and candidly, that's why private equity is so interested in this space, is so much of this revenue should be recurring, because once someone starts Botox, let's be honest, or Dysport, or any other neurotoxin, we are agnostic here. Dex by ICU, Valium ICU. Once they start, they certainly don't stop. So I think, but I think at the end of the day, there are plenty of companies who throw a lot of resources at acquisition and forget to sort of look at the other side and make sure that the company catches that person, and also look at why, right? I think so you can spend money on customers or patients in this case, but not all patients are created equal. And so, if you are focusing on a certain segment and you're using a like low cost marketing strategy, you're probably chasing a patient segment that is really cost conscious and probably not loyal, right? Whereas if you deployed those dollars to a really robust referral program, so essentially just tracking what are the cohorts of your patients who have the highest retention rates, and then doubling down on those segments versus taking a wide sort of swath of the market.
Yeah, and again, like we said before, that's not easy to do, because especially when you're starting, right, and you're new, you want to get everybody. You want, the idea is to cast a wide net, and that's the most fun. But you're right. I mean, the more the riches are in the niches, and if the niches are your certain repeat clients, those are the ones you need to focus on, and you can have an incredible business just on those.
Yeah, I love that. I've never heard of that tagline, but I like it. I might take it.
That's
I'll give you
interesting.
I'll give
Use
you
that all the
credit.
time. I have it tattooed to my back.
I won't ask. And to be fair, Skytale in many ways is still a startup. And in an early company, there will always be a balance between speed and thoroughness. And so, I understand that at certain points of your business, the answer is to just run. But I think, once you're up and running, there's a moment in time where you do sort of need to stop, look back, what worked, what didn't work, so that moving forward, you can make sure that you have that feedback cycle, and essentially not waste your time or resources on things that just don't stick.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you most excited about at this? First of all, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, what's the future? And then what are you most excited about when it comes to that future?
Ooh, what do I want to be when I grow up? I'm really excited. So at Skytale, we actually just launched a third line of business, which is a private capital funding line of business, where we take small equity stakes and provide lines of credit to entrepreneurs in the spaces that we serve. And that came out of just the need that we kept hearing from our clients. And one of the things that I think Ben and I and James are really aligned on is continuing to build out a suite of services for our customers. And so that we, are sort of a classic merchant bank, if you will, that they could get many of those, now you might be able to fundraise a little bit, you can prepare to sell with Annie, then you can sell on the banking side. But what else do they need? And I think one of the most fun things about my job is I just get to listen all day. What are your pain points? What are your worries? What keeps you up at night? What is hard? What is fun? And follow that. And it's really fun to be in a business that encourages just trying out new things too, and seeing what sticks, and seeing what doesn't stick. So I think I'm gonna be here for a long time is the real answer.
So you're gonna grow up and you're gonna be part of Skytale, which is awesome.
Yeah. And Skytale might look a little different and might look a little bit the same, but I think at the end of the day, our clients are our heroes, and that's going to be the ethos and the mission statement that I think, regardless of what we do in the future, will carry throughout.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm just curious, are there any, like, what's your favorite like business book that you like to refer to people? You say, hey, this is, if there is one, like this is one that you should read, or one that you should take a look at. Are there any that pop out, or podcasts, maybe anything you can look at?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I will admit I'm a fiction lady, but I do occasionally am forced to read a business book. There's always the fun ones, right? Like, Shoe Dog and some of the ones about Elon
Mhm.
Musk and Steve Jobs. But a sort of smaller niche book it was written by a professor at the business school that I went to. It's called Power. Um,
Mhm.
and it just talks about, it's a framework for just looking at an organization and understanding sort of like where the power sits. And it's
Mhm.
really interesting in different organizations. It's in different, in technology in Silicon Valley, the power hub is the engineering team, right?
Mhm.
Whereas in, a different space, it might be the sales team. Here, it's the producer, right? Like, who is your
Mhm.
anchor injector? And making sure that sort of everything in your organization is tailored to that. So that's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome.
and my favorite podcast in the business version, it's called Acquired. And I think they do a
Uh-huh.
really nice job is to sort of like doing like a really deep dive on companies. I learned like finally what like ByteDance does in Huawei. It
Yeah,
took me a while, but they do a good overview.
that's awesome. That's cool. No, that's super helpful because I mean, they're in some ways all of these books and the podcast. I mean, they're all talking about and doing the same thing. Just they're coming at it from different approaches and different angles, and it's really just whatever kind of resonates with you. I think that's
What's your
awesome.
favorite? Do you have a favorite?
Um, I have. I've liked them all. The one, I mean, we're kind of so we have looked at like the traction books that are out there that have like the operating system. This isn't really a business book, but it's one that really got me kind of geeking out for the first time, and that was Moneyball, which is not a which is
Oh,
about when they first started doing analytics in baseball, and so it's all about analytics and making decisions based upon data. And like for whatever reason, it just kind of it resonated with me. So I've read that a couple times and it really kind of gets me fired up about it. It makes me want to go look at my data, which is kind of weird.
that's actually then maybe that's a kind of a fun, like that's what the book, it's like using a fun framework to
Yeah,
teach analytics. And
that's
then it's
what it
like,
is.
actually, I can do this. And then you can apply this to,
Yeah.
your areas
It's
of
it's
life.
so that's probably what I would go with. But I mean, there's so many of them and I'm always looking for podcasts because you know, there's so many podcasts. Like it's almost too many to choose from at this point. So
I
except
know.
this one is the best. So
Yeah,
obviously.
exactly.
Well, Annie, I really appreciate you coming on. We've been yapping at this for gosh, going on 45 minutes, and I we'll have to have you back as things kind of develop. I'm so impressed with what Skytale has done. You guys are amazing. It's been fun to watch you grow. You're kind of on the rocket ship now too, so you're just going to ride it, and I'm sure that what you're adding is going to be really impactful, and it's great to see.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the kind words. And it's been a treat to be here. So I'll come back anytime.
Awesome. Sounds good. And by the way, where can folks reach you if they want to find out more, if they want to reach out to you? And you can go ahead and give your cell phone out, and then everyone will just start calling.
Yeah, perfect. All right, get out your pencils, get out your paper. I would say you can send emails to inquiries@skytalegroup.com. And don't you worry, that does go right into my inbox, so I will see it.
All right. Awesome. Annie Robertson Hockey of Skytale, president and head of consulting. Appreciate you joining us. We will have you on soon again and enjoy your weekend. It's Memorial Day. So, oh, before we go, real quick,
Yeah,
I should have said at the beginning, you were at MSS for the first time in Vegas.
it
What
was.
did you think? I'm always people's first time to a conference in our industry is always interesting. Medical spa show. What did you think?
Oh my goodness. I would just say it's a good thing that that wasn't my first aesthetics conference, or else it would have been like, totally wide-eyed. I'd say it was fantastic. It was a fantastic conference, and it's sort of like a Super Bowl, right, of conferences, and it's fun. What's really fun is so many people were there, and it was an opportunity to talk to so many people. But I'll tell you what, I was pretty pooped when I got
Yeah, me too. I'm still pooped.
home.
I'm still
Yeah.
pooped. All right. Thank you, Annie. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Thank you for watching the Medical Spa Insider podcast. please make sure to subscribe to our channel for future videos and podcasts. For more information about the American Med Spa Association, please check our description below.